Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Cathedral. The Sunshine Cathedral is a different kind of church where the past is past and the future has infinite possibilities. And with that, we invite you to come and worship with us here on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. at 1480 Southwest 9th Avenue. Now, I invite you to come in and worship with us here at the Sunshine Cathedral.
This is a reading from the book of Revelation. I am the Alpha and the Omega, says your God, who is, who was, and is to come, the Almighty. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Our second reading is from the wisdom of Louise Hay. If our lives are unhappy, or if we are feeling unfulfilled, it's very easy to blame our parents or them and say it's all their fault. However, if we do, we stay stuck in our conditions, our problems, and our frustrations. Words of blame will not bring us freedom. Remember, there is power in our words. Our power comes from taking responsibilities for our lives. If we want to be responsible for our lives, we've got to be responsible for our mouths. The words and phrases we say are extensions of our thoughts. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
God is with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
As soon as it was daybreak, the chief priests, the elders, and the religious scholars and the whole Sanhedrin reached a decision. They bound Jesus and led him away and handed him over to Pilate, who interrogated him. "Are you a king?" he asked. Jesus responded, "You are the one who is saying it." The chief priest then brought many accusations against him. Pilate interrogated Jesus again. "Surely you have some answer. See how many accusations they are leveling against you?" But to Pilate's astonishment, Jesus made no further response. This is the gospel, the good news.
I love those inspiring statements. I especially love that first one, that quote by William James. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. William James was a philosopher and a psychologist and a Harvard professor. He was the son of a Swedenborgian theologian, and his godfather was Ralph Waldo Emerson. He personally met Sigmund Freud and Mark Twain. His students at Harvard included Teddy Roosevelt and W.E.B. Du Bois. And this deep thinker, this student of thought, this teacher of constructive thinking, said such brilliant things as, acceptance of what has happened is the first step to overcoming the consequences of any misfortune. Acceptance of what has happened is the first step to overcoming the consequences of any misfortune. He also said, the greatest discovery of my generation is that one can alter one's life by altering one's attitude. And he said, why should we think upon things that are lovely? Because thinking determines life. It is a common habit to blame life upon the environment. Environment modifies life, but it does not govern life. The soul is stronger than its surroundings. I love those sayings. I love learning from William James, how amazing it must have been to have been in his classroom in Harvard. I wasn't, I'm not that old, but how wonderful it would have been to have heard these things come out of his mouth. And yet here he says and writes these brilliant things, reminding us that our soul is stronger than its surroundings. What happens around or to us can't determine how we respond to life. That's our choice. We can choose the very next thought we think. As Johnny Coleman says, I am the thinker that thinks the thought that makes the thing. Our passage from Revelation today, brief as it is, gives us a look into the power of choosing our attitudes. The writer of Revelation, writing about the year 96, it's the end of the first century, almost the very end, only 4 years left of the first century of the Common Era. In 29, Jesus was executed, and in 70, the temple and the holy city of Jerusalem completely destroyed. And then for the last two imperial administrations, the last two Caesars, Nero and then Domitian, they have been extremely cruel rulers, especially to the community to which this writer writes. It has been a period, a century really, of escalating turmoil for this community. And in that context, the writer of Revelation tells us that God is the first and the last. Even when the world is coming apart at the seams, even when the sky is falling, even when the world as we've known it seems to be ending, God is the first and the last. In the Greek alphabet, zeta is the 6th letter, but the last letter, the 24th, they don't have 26 in that alphabet, only 24, and the 24th last letter is omega. Alpha and omega suggest completion, wholeness, eternity. Past, present, future, here and there, first and last, and everything in between. The omnipresent wholeness, the animating force of our lives, the power and presence which is exactly where we are, flowing through us, expressing as us. This divine isness, now and forever, is known by many of us simply as God, the God in which we all live and move and have our being. Now, this is important, that it's in God that we live and move and have our being, that God is the first and the last, that God is the ground of being, the source and substance of our lives. Why is this important? It is especially important when it looks like we're all alone. It's important to remember that isn't true. When the world is coming apart at the seams, when the sky is falling, when the world as we have known it seems to be ending right in front of us, it is important to remember that it's in God that we live and move and have our being, that God is the first and the last, the all in all. It's important for the writer of Revelation. Revelation is being written in response to Roman imperial oppression. Jesus has been executed. The city has been destroyed. The temple has been destroyed. And our community is under attack. And in response to this century of turmoil, this writer writes this very imaginative, almost sci-fi drama. And in this book, we see this mark of the beast, 666, which is a numeric representation of Nero, his name. And the text even says the number is the name. It's very clear. I don't know why we got so off base with it. But the 666, in Aramaic and in Latin and in Greek, the letters have numeric values. Well, Nero Caesar's name, the numerical value is 666. And so it's very clear who we're talking about. The great dragon is the Roman imperial military forces. The beast is the emperor, and so on. The second beast are the false prophets who serve the emperor. The writer chooses to use creative imagination to deal with the difficulties of his day, not to predict future calamity, but to offer hope to current calamity. The writer chooses to use creative imagination to deal with difficulties of his day and then share his creativity to uplift and to empower and to encourage others. Last week, the readings were apocalyptic, and today the readings are apocalyptic, and it's no accident that those readings lead us into the season of Advent, waiting for something to come, some coming that will give us hope and strength and courage and peace and joy. In fact, hope, peace, love, and joy are the themes we will explore throughout Advent. And so, the writer of Revelation isn't trying to terrify people, but is trying to empower people who have been terrified their whole lives. And he's just trying to remind them that no matter what is happening, God is the first and the last. Good is the first and the last. The chaos in Revelation actually suggests that hope, faith, the way we choose our words, and the way we form community can help us navigate, and in some instances, even take authority over the chaos of life. When the sky is falling, Revelation says there is still reason for hope. In fact, when the sky is falling is when you need hope the most, and there's hope to be had. When the world is coming apart at the seams, we can choose to imagine possibilities, and we can choose to hope. We can choose our next thought, and that next thought, that new thought, can be a thought of hope and optimism. Take courage and never give up. That is the message of Revelation. Take courage and never give up hope. And the message begins way in the beginning in chapter 1. Revelation, again, this is a clue. Revelation is the only book in the Bible that promises a blessing to its readers. And to be blessed is to be happy. And so the point of Revelation is to offer some happiness to people who need it most, not terror, but hope. And the message begins back in chapter 1, reminding us that God, the good, the ground of being, the source and substance of life, is omnipresent and everlasting. God is with and within us, the Alpha and Omega. The one that was with us in the Exodus is with us still as we face the tyranny of Rome. The one with us as we face the tyranny of Pharaoh is with us as we face the tyranny of Caesar. And that same omnipresent divine love will be with us forever. It is with us as we face the tyranny of addiction. It is with us as we face the tyranny of depression. It is with us as we face the tyranny of lack. It is with us as we face the tyranny of loneliness. It is with us as we face the tyranny of medical challenges. We can take courage and have hope because it is God who is the first and the last, not the lab report, but God is the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega. The diabolical forces seem to come against us, but there is a truth within us that they cannot touch or harm in any way. The Alpha and the Omega, the omnipresence of life, is expressing as us, and our sacred value is our ultimate and everlasting truth. And no circumstance can ever rob us of that. And once we know that and own that, then hope is always available to us. Hope that the situations of life cannot take away. We can accept what has happened and dare to face what's next and summon hope all along the way. What is overlooked in Revelation is the centrality of a lamb. A lamb is next to the throne. A lamb is surrounded by elders. A lamb who has suffered as the community is suffering, and yet the Lamb is victorious. What is overlooked is that the centrality, especially in chapter 5 of the book of Revelation, the centrality of this Lamb figure. The power of Revelation isn't monsters or warfare, cosmic or earthly. The real power of Revelation is Lamb power. Ruling through violence and intimidation, command and control, that's the way of Caesar. All of these left behind scenarios, that's just Caesar. That's just empires of every age. That's just the Spanish Empire coming into South America and taking over and ruining and destroying lives. That's just the Soviet Union. That is just every empire. Violence and intimidation, command and control. It's the way of the Nazis. It's the way of the Persian Empire. It's the way of every empire where someone forces others by command and control and wins by force. That's Caesar's way. That's the imperial way. And Revelation is a resistance to that system. Apocalyptic literature is resistance to oppression. Revelation is a resistance to the way of Caesar. So the way of Revelation can't be the same way. It is an opposite way. It is a resistance to the way of Caesar. And so the real power that is opposite Caesar's power is Lamb power. The power of compassion. The power of gentleness. Gentleness that is so much stronger than hateful schemes. Lambs don't scare many creatures, so we don't think of them as being particularly powerful. Lambs are beautiful and gentle, and they thrive best in a caring environment. They thrive best in community, which is why when there are 100 sheep and one strays off, the good shepherd goes after the one, because it's in community that it will be nurtured and kept safe. Lambs thrive in community. Lambs are beautiful and gentle. Lambs are playful. They delight in leaping and playing and grazing. I had a film clip of lambs leaping and playing and grazing, but I decided not to choose it because one of the ways they were playing was of a rather adult nature. And bees do it, birds do it, even educated fleas do it, but we don't always want to see that in church. And so lambs delight in leaping and playing and grazing. They find joy right where they are and right as they are. Lambs live with and within the environment without trying to take over, without becoming a potentate or an emperor. And it is the lamb that proves victorious over the beast and the dragon in Revelation. People forget that the real power of Revelation is lamb power. Revelation isn't about destruction, it is about the cure for destruction. The destruction has already happened. Where are we going to find hope? Through lamb power. Using words and ideals and optimism and a belief in justice and equity, a concern for the least of these, and a relentless insistence for a place at the table without trying to demonize or colonize others. That's lamb power. Lamb power isn't saying, this is my table and I'll decide who gets to sit here. Lamb power is just saying, everyone should have a place at the table, including me. That's lamb power. To touch the leper, the untouchable, and to feed the hungry, and to care for the voiceless and powerless, the widow and orphans in Scripture. To challenge and overcome prejudices and to refuse to let the powers that be define any human being as anything less than a child of God. That's lamb power. We see it in Jesus. We see it in Harriet Tubman. We see it in Gandhi. We see it in Martin Luther King Jr. We see it in Dorothy Day. Without raising an army, without training assassins, without even waging a propaganda war to dehumanize his opponents, Jesus challenges oppression, affirms the sacred value of all people, and contributes something healing into the life stream of humanity. That's lamb power. Now, I don't mean, when I'm talking about lambs and lamb power, I don't mean that in the brutal way that animals were once slaughtered to appease the gods. In antiquity, people didn't really know how biology works exactly, but they knew if you bled too much, you died. And so the life force must be in the blood. And so blood was magical and sacred. And so the most magical, sacred being they could think of was deity. And so to appease the deity or honor the deity, they would honor that life by sacrificing another. And sometimes we have put that model, ancient and brutal as it is, onto our understandings of Jesus, forgetting way back in Genesis that when Abraham wanted to do that with his son, there was a stop. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. That sort of violence isn't how we need to be. We don't have to sacrifice one another. Now, in that story, a ram is substituted, and so there is still bloodshed. But we got past that even. So I don't mean, when I'm talking about lamb power, I'm not talking about destroying a lamb and that somehow in being devastated, the lamb is powerful. Execution is the result of how Jesus lived his life. It's not the purpose of it. I never try to glorify the brutal and vicious way that the Roman imperial system tortured Jesus to death. No, it isn't his victimization that makes Jesus a lamb. It's his gentleness. It's that gentleness that can't be destroyed even by execution, even by torture. That gentleness that rises again and ascends and lives forever and raises us up. Now, of course, Jesus got angry and scared and confused. He wasn't emotionally stunted. He experienced every legitimate human feeling. But when he contemplated his mission, it wasn't to force, it wasn't to blame, it wasn't to injure or torture or to oppress those without power or even to get even with those who had power. And it wasn't even to wallow in impotent making self-pity. It was to demonstrate how even the powerless lambs in society can summon the power of hope that no situation can take away. The power of gentle hope that not even the forces of Rome could destroy. The reign of Christ must be something radically different than worldly power. It must be something radically different than an emperor or a king on a throne. It must be something radically different than armies and warfare. The reign of Christ must be something radically different than worldly power, a symbolic reign that represents inclusion and fairness and hope and healing. It is the reign of Christ, not the rule of Christ. It is reigning, not ruling over, but serving with. That's the reign of Christ. The reign of Christ is symbolized by hands soiled from working with and for the so-called least of these. The leper, the prostitute, the Samaritan, the child, the Canaanite woman, the slave, the injured, the elderly, the queer by any name. It's so different from the power systems of the world that those systems can't understand it. And so they respond with fear to it, as they do to most things they cannot understand, or which seems to challenge the status quo. When he's asking the gospel reading today, are you or are you not a king? Jesus just says, that's your story. He doesn't own that. He doesn't play that game. That's your story. That's the way you work. You say it. That's not what I'm about. Kingship wasn't his aim. Kinship was. That's lamb power. That's the reign of Christ. He wanted to lift up those who had been knocked down. That's lamb power. That's the reign of Christ. And so, are you ready to be part of this reign? Not subject to that rule, but part of this inclusive and just reign. Are you ready to be lifted up so that you can then lift up others? Are you ready to be happier? You can't lead where you won't go, and you can't teach what you don't know, and you certainly can't give what you don't have. So if you want to lift up others, you must first be lifted up. Are you ready to be lifted up? And then are you ready to commit to sharing that gift with others? To spread joy, you've got to have some. Are you ready? Are you ready for the reign of Christ? The hopeful, joyous, healing, peaceful reign of Christ. I can't promise that everything will go your way, but I can promise that it doesn't have to go your way for you to be happy. Complaining won't do it. If complaining hasn't created joy in your life so far, give it up. Or, if the habit is so ingrained, once you've been doing something for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years, it may be hard to say, oh, I just won't do it anymore. But if it's so ingrained that it seems impossible to give it up, then at least commit to stopping once you slip into the old habit. Oh, here I go again. Let me stop. Let me choose a new thought, because I am the thinker that thinks the thought that makes the thing. If the habit is so ingrained that we just keep slipping into the old habits, we can at least stop and make another choice. And if we need help, there's help to be had. There is self-help literature. There are support groups. There's therapy. There's medication. There's worship. There's all kinds of things to help us be our best selves. Let's avail ourselves of that help. This isn't a problem unique to one or two of us. This isn't just me. I know you're all thinking, Durrell, you're just preaching to yourself. No, I'm preaching to all of us, including myself. This isn't a problem unique to one or two of us. This is an epidemic from which we have all suffered now and again. But we don't have to stay there. We don't have to stay in just bitterness and fear and regret and complaining and anxiety. We don't have to stay there. There is a reign of Christ we can participate in, which is very different than those worldly systems. We can choose to be something better, something more, something worthy of our sacred value. We can choose to share in the healing, all-inclusive, uplifting reign of Christ. Blame, shame, trying to make our problem someone else's fault. We've all done it, of course. My life isn't where I want it to be because my boss is mean. I would never say that because you're my boss, but and you're wonderful. But I've heard other people say that. My life isn't where I want it to be because my boss is mean, or my teacher is stupid, or my parents were abusive, or my spouse is dishonest, or. But you don't have to work for that terrible boss. She will accept your resignation today, or maybe give you a transfer. And that fool of a teacher isn't your parole officer. You can drop that class, or transfer to another school, or just put up with him till the end of the semester when you'll be released from his academic dungeon anyway. And maybe your parents were evil to you. Maybe they were just evil, period. Maybe they were no good. Maybe they were the only two people on earth that had no sacred value. And maybe they were really, really horrible to you until you were 18. And you've had from 18 to now, though, to start working on how to get past that. You've had 5 whole years to work on how to get past that. The first 18 years are on them, and after that, we eventually have to take some responsibility for our own healing. Yes, they did something bad, and yes, I decided that I wasn't going to live my entire life in that place. It doesn't excuse them. It just keeps us from using them as an excuse for not moving forward. What if instead of wallowing in how wrong they did us, whoever they are, we said, what happened, happened. I don't like it. I wish it hadn't happened, but damned if I'm going to let it rob me of any more joy. It was terrible, but thank God it's over, as long as I don't keep it on life support. Anne Frank said, I don't think of all the misery. I think of all the beauty that still remains. Anne Frank. Anne Frank didn't have an easy or even long life, but not even all the power of Nazi Germany could rob her of her optimism and her power to choose how she would face the challenges at hand. She had lamb power. The past is past, and the future has infinite possibilities. That's lamb power. We begin our services every Sunday with lamb power. The past is past, and the future has infinite possibilities. No matter what has happened, or what is happening around or even to us, what we believe about ourselves and how we feel about ourselves is a choice that only we can make. Once we choose hope, peace, joy, and love, the qualities we will hear throughout Advent, we are actually choosing the reign of Christ, the kinship with all that is good. And this is the good news. Amen. Are you ready for lamb power to raise you up? You've tried the other things. You've tried the demolition derbies. You've tried the professional wrestling. You've tried boxing. You've tried all of the combat, all of the contact sports. And mostly what you wound up with was injuries. Are you ready for lamb power? Something that lifts you above all of that. Are you ready to release the past to the past and create the future you really deserve by embracing the hope that is available to you with your very next thought? Are you ready? Are you ready to enter into the reign of Christ? If so, ministers are coming forward right now to anoint you with oil. It's a simple ritual, no magic in it. It's just a reminder that you're not alone. You never were, and you never will be. God is the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega. And that because God is the source and substance of our lives, the first and last, it is in God that we live and move and have our being. There is always reason to hope. And if we will continue to hope and to strive for peace and justice and healing and goodwill, then we will continue to build the blessed community, the reign of Christ. And miracles will happen in our lives and for our world.
On the night you were betrayed, you took the bread. After giving thanks, you broke it and said, "This is my body, open to you. And as you eat this, remember me."
This is my body, open to you. And as you eat this, remember me. On the night you were betrayed, you held the cup. After giving thanks, you lifted it up. This is my life, poured out for you. And as you drink this, remember me. This is my life, poured out for you. And as you drink this, remember me.
Thank you for the wine and for the bread. We
We recall the life you lived and the truth that you spread.
Thank God our Maker, oh heavenly dove. In Christ we celebrate your wondrous love. In God our Maker, oh heavenly dove. In Christ we celebrate your wondrous love.
Here at the Sunshine Cathedral, we practice an open communion, and what that means is you don't have to be a member of this church or any church to receive the sacrament. Just as you are with whatever your beliefs or doubts may be, you are welcome to participate in this feast of unconditional love. My friends, these are the gifts of God for all the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Hello, I want to thank you for joining us for worship today here at the Sunshine Cathedral. Again, if you're ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, please stop by and worship with us on Sundays at 9 and 10:30 a.m. If you'd like to find out more about the Sunshine Cathedral, or about our resources, or about our books published by our senior pastor, the Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins, or if you'd like to make a donation to the Sunshine Cathedral, please visit us at www.sunshinecathedral.org. Until the next time, may God continue to richly bless you on your journey.